Hi, I'm Emily Harper, 34 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. 2 years ago, I sat at my parents' polished dining table, watching them hand my sister Lauren a check for $250,000 to buy a fancy Seattle condo, while I overheard them call my baking dreams a hobby and me a waste of potential. That night, I walked out, blocked their numbers, swore I'd prove them wrong. Last month, Lauren drove past my flagship bakery in Portland's Pearl District and called our parents, stunned, saying, "You need to see what Emily's built." If you're watching this, hit that like and subscribe button and tell me where you're tuning in from. As I share how my love for baking, sparked in childhood, set me on a path to build a dessert empire, despite my family's doubts. Growing up in Lake Oswego, a posh suburb just south of Portland, my family looked like the picture of perfection, at least from the outside. Our modern craftsman home, with its wide wraparound porch, manicured rose bushes, and 3-car garage, was a status symbol in a neighborhood full of doctors, lawyers, and tech execs. My father, Robert Harper, was a real estate developer who spent his days flipping luxury properties and his evenings boasting about multi-million-dollar deals. My mother, Susan, a former PR executive, traded boardrooms for charity galas and country club luncheons, curating our family's image like it was her full-time job. To them, success meant wealth, prestige, and a very specific kind of life. One my older sister Lauren seemed born to deliver. Lauren, 4 years my senior, was their golden child, the daughter destined to carry the Harper name into elite circles. When she was 12 and showed an interest in law, my parents enrolled her in debate camps, hired a private tutor to prep her for the LSAT years early, and framed her mock trial certificates on the living room wall like trophies. I was 8 when I discovered my love for baking, turning our pristine kitchen into a chaotic lab of flour, sugar, and half-baked experiments. I'd spend hours mixing batters, trying to recreate the gooey chocolate chip cookies I'd seen on TV. But my mother would sigh at the mess, wiping down counters with a tight smile, and my father would say, "Emily, stop playing house. Lauren's working on real skills." The difference in how they treated us wasn't always blatant, but it was there, woven into the fabric of our childhood. When Lauren won her first debate tournament at 14, my parents threw a catered dinner party, inviting neighbors to toast her bright future. When I won a blue ribbon at a school baking contest for my lemon poppy seed muffins, my mother said, "That's cute, honey," and my father asked why I wasn't focusing on math. My ribbons stayed in a desk drawer, pulled out only when I begged to know why they weren't displayed like Lauren's awards. "Lauren's achievements have long-term potential," my father explained once, his tone patient but dismissive. "Baking's just a hobby." Birthdays made the disparity impossible to ignore. For Lauren's 16th, my parents rented a waterfront venue on the Willamette River, complete with a DJ and a towering cake from a fancy Portland bakery. Not mine, of course. They surprised her with a shiny new SUV, parked in the driveway with a giant red bow. The neighbors clapped as she squealed and hugged my parents. For my 16th, I got a used hatchback, a practical gray sedan with a sticky gear shift. "You just need something to get to school," my mother said, handing me the keys without fanfare. It wasn't about the money, though the gap was obvious. It was the lack of excitement, the absence of celebration. Like my milestones didn't deserve the same spotlight. The one person who saw my baking as more than a childish whim was my grandmother, Clara. Grandma Clara had grown up in rural Oregon, running a small diner in Eugene where she baked pies that locals still talked about decades later. After moving to Portland to marry my grandfather, she kept her love for cooking alive in her cozy bungalow in Selwood, where her tiny kitchen always smelled of cinnamon and nostalgia. Every weekend, I'd escape to her house, a refuge from my parents' polished world. "Some people measure success by bank accounts," she'd tell me, her hands dusted with flour as we rolled pie dough. "But others measure it by the joy they create. You, Emily, you're a joy maker." Grandma Clara understood why I'd spend hours perfecting a batch of oatmeal raisin cookies or experimenting with lavender shortbread. She taught me how to balance flavors, how a pinch of sea salt could make chocolate sing. And she shared stories of her diner days, when a single slice of huckleberry pie could turn a stranger's bad day around. She gifted me her old recipe book, its pages yellowed and stained, and a set of vintage measuring spoons she'd used in the 60s. "You've got a gift, Emily," she'd say, her eyes crinkling as we pulled a tray of scones from her ancient oven. The world needs people who feed the soul, not just the stomach. At 10, I decided to bake a strawberry tart for my school's spring fair, using Grandma Clara's recipe. I spent days picking berries at a local farm, learning how to make a buttery crust that didn't crack. When I won first place, a local food blog wrote a short piece about Lake Oswego's young baking star. I rushed home, clutching the ribbon, expecting my parents to be proud. My mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but clean the kitchen before dinner." My father, reading his Wall Street Journal, muttered, "Lauren's debate team just qualified for nationals. That's something with real impact." The ribbon went into my drawer, next to the others. By middle school, the pattern was cemented. When Lauren made the honor roll, my parents took her to a swanky Portland steakhouse, the kind with $50 entrees and a wine list longer than a novel. When I made the honor roll, they nodded and said, "That's what we expect." Academic success was the baseline, but only certain achievements, Lauren's achievements, were celebrated. I started sneaking my baking projects to Grandma Clara's house, where I could experiment without judgment. One Saturday, we made a vegan chocolate cake, my first attempt at plant-based baking, using mashed avocado instead of eggs. It was a disaster, dense as a brick. But Clara laughed and said, "Failure's just a step toward perfection. Keep going." High school brought new chances to chase my passion. At 15, I entered a regional baking competition with a vegan lemon tart, inspired by Clara's recipes, but tweaked with almond milk and coconut oil. I spent weeks testing the custard's texture, determined to make it creamy without dairy. When I won first place, a small Portland bakery offered me a part-time job decorating cupcakes on weekends. The local paper ran a photo of me holding my tart, grinning like I'd won the lottery. My parents attended the awards ceremony, but my father seemed distracted, checking his phone. Later, I overheard him tell a colleague, "It's just a school thing. Lauren's applying to Yale Law next year. That's the real deal." That summer, everything changed. Grandma Clara was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, her vibrant spirit trapped in a body that was failing her. I spent every moment I could with her, bringing my latest creations to her hospital room, blueberry muffins, cinnamon rolls, anything to make her smile. One afternoon, as I fed her a bite of my vegan lavender shortbread, she grabbed my hand, her grip weaker than I'd ever felt. "Follow your heart, Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your parents are chasing a dream that's not yours. Don't let them dim your light." She passed away 3 weeks before my high school graduation, leaving a void I didn't know how to fill. At her funeral, surrounded by relatives swapping stories about her diner, I overheard my father tell an aunt, "Emily's still in this baking phase. She'll grow out of it and pick something practical." His words stung, but they also lit a fire in me. That night, alone in my room, surrounded by college brochures for food science programs, I made a silent promise to Clara. I'd prove my passion wasn't a phase. I'd build something real, something that honored her belief in me, even if my parents never saw it. As I packed for Oregon State, I carried Clara's recipe book and her words with me, a shield against the doubt waiting at home. My parents' world of status and wealth felt further away than ever, but I was ready to carve my own path, one cookie, one tart, one dream at a time. Leaving home for Oregon State and Corvallis felt like stepping into an entirely new world. Lake Oswego's manicured lawns and country club lunches were replaced by a campus buzzing with students, food trucks, and the faint scent of pine drifting from the surrounding forests. I'd chosen the food science program with a focus on sustainable culinary arts because it promised to blend my love for baking with innovation. The program was known for its cutting-edge research into plant-based ingredients, and I was thrilled at the thought of creating desserts that were both delicious and kind to the planet. But when I told my parents about my excitement, my father glanced up from his laptop and chuckled, "Food science? What? You're going to invent a better cookie?" My mother added, "If it involves business, maybe there's hope for you yet." Their words stung, but I pushed them aside, clutching Grandma Clara's recipe book, my reminder of why I was there. College wasn't the carefree experience I'd imagined. While Lauren posted Instagram photos from Stanford, cocktail parties, networking events with law firm recruiters, I was working 20 hours a week at the Beanery, a campus coffee shop, just to cover expenses my parents deemed extras. They paid my tuition and basic dorm costs. But unlike Lauren, who got a generous monthly allowance and a sleek Palo Alto apartment, I was on my own for books, clothes, and anything beyond the basics. "It's character building," my mother said when I asked why Lauren got more. "She's on a serious career path." The message was clear. My passion for baking wasn't worth investing in. The Beanery was a grind. Steaming milk, wiping counters, serving muffins I knew I could make better. But it gave me something priceless. Access to a commercial kitchen after hours. I'd stay late, experimenting with vegan recipes, trying to recreate Clara's pies without eggs or butter. One night, I spent 4 hours perfecting a vegan lemon bar recipe, swapping eggs for flaxseed and tweaking the crust until it was flaky yet sturdy. When I finally got it right, the tangy curd melting on my tongue, I felt a spark of pride no one could take away. But those moments were fleeting. Seeing Lauren's posts about her summer internship at a top law firm while I scrubbed espresso machines made me wonder if I was chasing a pipe dream. My saving grace was Professor Linda Chen, head of the Food Science Department and a pioneer in plant-based culinary research. During my sophomore year, I enrolled in her course on sustainable food systems, and she noticed my passion immediately. After I presented a project on vegan baking, featuring those lemon bars, she pulled me aside. "Emily, your recipes show real innovation," she said, her glasses slipping down her nose. "Have you considered scaling these for a wider market, like cafes or grocery stores?" I admitted I'd dreamed of it, but didn't know where to start. She smiled. "Start small. Test your ideas at local markets. The world's ready for sustainable desserts." Under Linda's mentorship, I dove deeper into my craft. I spent hours in the university's test kitchen, a stainless steel haven filled with mixers and ovens, experimenting with almond milk, coconut oil, and aquafaba, the liquid from canned chickpeas that whipped up like egg whites. My junior year project was a vegan chocolate tart that used avocado for creaminess, inspired by Clara's knack for resourceful cooking. I tested it on my dorm mates, who devoured it during late-night study sessions, begging for seconds. When I entered it in a university innovation contest, it won a $10,000 grant to test my recipes at Corvallis's Saturday Farmers Market. I was over the moon, imagining Clara cheering me on. But when I called home to share the news, my mother said, "That's sweet, honey," before pivoting to Lauren's clerkship offer from a federal judge. My father added, "10 grand's nice, but Lauren's on track for 6 figures after graduation." The farmers market became my proving ground. Every Saturday, I'd haul a folding table, a cooler of tarts, and a handwritten sign to Corvallis's riverfront, setting up beside vendors selling kale and artisanal cheese. My vegan tarts, lemon, chocolate, and a new mango coconut flavor, sold out by noon, with locals raving about the creamy texture and bright flavors. A food truck owner bought a dozen to serve at his cafe, and a blogger snapped photos for a post titled, "Oregon's Next Dessert Star." I sent the link to my parents, hoping for a flicker of pride. My father replied, "Looks like fun, but focus on your studies." The dismissal hurt, but it fueled me. I started saving every penny from my market sales, dreaming of a day when my baking would be more than a fun side gig. By senior year, I was juggling classes, coffee shop shifts, and the market booth, often sleeping just 4 hours a night. On weekends, I'd drive to Portland to source organic ingredients from local farms, learning about sustainable suppliers who grew berries without pesticides. One rainy March morning, as I sold tarts under a leaky canopy, a customer named Priya Shah stopped by. She owned Greenhaven Cafe, a sustainable eatery in Northeast Portland. After tasting my mango tart, she smiled and said, "This could be in every coffee shop in Oregon. Let's talk." We met the next week, and she shared her own story of starting her cafe against her family's wishes. "You've got the talent," she said, sketching ideas on a napkin. "Now you need a plan to scale." Her encouragement felt like Clara's voice, urging me forward. Graduation came, and while Lauren's Stanford degree was celebrated with a lavish party at our parents' home, catered, of course, by someone else's bakery, my honors degree in food science got a simple, "That's nice, dear," over breakfast. I'd specialized in sustainable culinary arts with a minor in small business management and had built a portfolio of vegan recipes that earned praise from professors and local vendors alike. But when I mentioned my plan to work in Portland's food scene, my father frowned. "Baking's not a career, Emily. What do you do with a degree like that? Open a cupcake shop?" I explained that the industry was growing, with opportunities in food innovation and sustainability consulting. He smirked. "If there's business involved, maybe you'll figure it out." I landed my first job at Sprout Bakery, a small vegan shop in Portland's Alberta Arts District, for $30,000 a year. It was barely enough to cover rent on a tiny studio in southeast Portland, where the walls were thin and the neighborhood was rough. But I loved the work. I spent my days mixing batters, decorating cupcakes, tweaking recipes for the shop's vegan dessert line. My boss, a gruff but kind woman named Marta, taught me how to scale recipes for wholesale orders. "You've got a knack for this," she said, after I created a vegan matcha cheesecake that became the shop's bestseller. Customers lined up for it, and a local food magazine featured it in a piece about Portland's vegan scene. I framed the article and hung it in my apartment, a small rebellion against my parents' doubts. Family dinners, now rare, were tense. My parents' questions always circled back to money. "How much are you making?" my father asked during a Thanksgiving visit. When I told him, he shook his head. "Lauren was earning six figures by 23. You're 23 and decorating cupcakes?" I explained that I was learning the industry, gaining hands-on experience, but he muttered, "It's a hobby, not a job." My mother tried to soften it. "Have you thought about an MBA? With your degree and some business skills, you could do something more substantial." Their words echoed the same old message. My passion wasn't enough. I started skipping dinners, claiming work conflicts, just to avoid the judgment. Living alone in my studio, I'd lie awake at night, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if they were right. Lauren's social media was a constant reminder of the life they approved of. Her sleek Seattle office, her designer handbags, her engagement announcement to David, a hedge fund manager. Meanwhile, I was scraping by, my fridge stocked with discounted produce and leftover dough. But every time I doubted myself, I'd pull out Clara's recipe book, its pages worn from use, and remember her words. "Feed the soul, Emily." I started a side hustle, selling vegan desserts at Portland's Saturday market, using my grant money to buy supplies. The first time I sold out, 50 tarts in 3 hours, I felt a rush of validation. Customers didn't care about my degree or my parents' opinions. They loved my food. One evening, after a 12-hour shift at Sprout, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, tweaking a recipe for vegan salted caramel brownies. I'd spent weeks perfecting the balance of sweet and salty, using coconut sugar and cashew cream. When I brought a batch to the shop, Marta took one bite and said, "This is going national someday, Emily." Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't just baking. I was building something. But my parents' voices still lingered, whispering that I'd never measure up to Lauren's real success. As I packed my market booth that weekend, I made a quiet vow. I'd keep going, not to prove them wrong, but to prove Clara right. By 25, I was living a life that finally felt like mine, even if it didn't look like much to my parents. My tiny southeast Portland studio, with its chipped paint and creaky floors, was a far cry from their Lake Oswego mansion. But it was home. My days were spent at Sprout Bakery, where I'd worked my way up to head baker, crafting vegan desserts that had customers lining up along Alberta Street. On weekends, I hauled my mango coconut tarts and salted caramel brownies to Portland's Saturday market, watching strangers light up with every bite. Those moments, handing a warm brownie to a kid who'd never tried vegan dessert before, or hearing a regular say my tarts were the highlight of their week, kept me going. But my parents' voices, calling my work a hobby, still lingered. And one single night, at my sister Lauren's engagement party, would change everything. It was late spring, and Lauren was getting married to David, a hedge fund manager with a smile as polished as his Rolex. My parents threw a lavish engagement party at their Lake Oswego home, transforming their backyard into a scene straight out of a magazine. White string lights draped over the pergola, a jazz quartet played on a makeshift stage, and servers weaved through the crowd with trays of sushi and champagne. I arrived early, partly out of habit, partly to avoid the inevitable questions about my little baking thing. Lauren and I weren't close. Her life of law firm happy hours and designer dresses felt worlds apart from mine. Still, I was happy for her. She greeted me with a quick hug, her diamond ring catching the light. "Thanks for coming, Em," she said, already distracted by guests. I smiled, offered to help set up, and tried to stay busy. The party was a perfect showcase of my parents' values, status, wealth, and polished perfection. My father, Robert, in a tailored suit, worked the crowd like a politician, boasting about Lauren's law firm achievements. My mother, Susan, floated between guests in a silk dress, her laughter practiced and precise. As the night wore on, I helped clear plates, avoiding small talk with relatives who asked why I wasn't doing more with my degree. And then came the moment that broke me. My father stood on this patio, glass raised high, his voice warm with pride. "Family is everything," he said. "Lauren's made us so proud. Stanford, a top law firm, and now a life with David." The crowd clapped as he handed Lauren an envelope. "To start your future," he announced, "we're giving you and David $250,000 for a condo in Seattle." Gasps and cheers erupted. Lauren hugged them, tears in her eyes, while David shook my father's hand. I stood frozen, a tray of empty glasses trembling in my hands. $250,000, more than I'd earn in a decade at Sprout. I clapped along, my smile tight. But inside, I was unraveling. The money wasn't the issue. It was the message. Lauren's future was worth investing in. Mine wasn't. After the toast, I slipped into the kitchen to stack dishes, needing a moment to breathe. That's when I heard them, my parents' voices drifting from the dining room, low but clear. "Lauren's got it all together," my mother said softly. "The right career, the right man." My father chuckled. "At least she's not wasting her life on cupcakes like Emily. All that education, and she's still playing in a kitchen." The word cupcakes landed like a punch. I'd heard their dismissals before, but this was different. Raw, unfiltered, final. I set the tray down, my hands shaking, and stepped into the doorway. They froze, my mother's face paling. "Emily," she stammered, "we didn't know you were there." "I heard enough," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "You think my life's a waste because it's not Lauren's." My father bristled, his tone defensive. "We're just worried you'll never have stability. Baking isn't a career." "It is to me," I shot back, "but you've never cared enough to see it." My mother reached out, her voice trembling. "We just want what's best for you." I shook my head. "No, you want what's best for you." I grabbed my coat, congratulated Lauren on my way out, and drove back to my studio, the city lights blurring through tears. That night, I sat on my lumpy couch, staring at Grandma Clara's recipe book. Their words echoed in my mind. Wasting my life, playing in a kitchen. But something shifted. I was done chasing their approval. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, deleted their emails. It wasn't just anger, it was liberation. For the first time, I felt free to build something without their judgment hanging over me. But freedom came with a cost. Holidays passed without their calls. Thanksgiving alone with a frozen pizza, Christmas with a single strand of lights in my window. I told myself it was worth it, but the silence was heavier than I'd expected. The next year was a whirlwind, equal parts grit and hope. I quit Sprout Bakery to start Harper's Vegan Sweets, pouring my savings, $4,000 from market sales, into a beat-up food truck I found on Craigslist. It was a rusty 1980s van with a temperamental engine, but I spent weeks scrubbing it clean, painting it mint green, and installing a secondhand oven. I named it Clara's Kitchen, a nod to the woman who'd always believed in me. My plan was simple: sell vegan desserts at Portland's markets and festivals, building a brand one tart at a time. I perfected my lineup: lavender shortbread, salted caramel brownies, mango coconut tarts, all made with organic, local ingredients like Oregon blueberries and hazelnuts. Every night I baked in a rented commercial kitchen, the hum of mixers drowning out my doubts. The Portland Saturday Market became my battleground. I'd park Clara's Kitchen near the Willamette River, beneath a canopy of oaks, setting up a table with handwritten signs and fairy lights. Rain or shine, I was there, handing out samples to skeptical hipsters and curious families. My first day, I sold 20 tarts in 6 hours, barely covering gas. But word spread. A regular named Rosa, a single mom who brought her daughter every week, said my brownies were like a hug in food form. A barista from a nearby coffee shop bought a dozen shortbreads for her counter, and soon other vendors were stopping by. I started posting photos on Instagram: golden tarts glistening in the sun, customers smiling with brownies, and one post, captioned, "Portland's Vegan Secret," went viral, racking up 10,000 likes overnight. Orders poured in. I was barely keeping up, baking until 2 a.m., hauling trays at dawn. The grind wasn't glamorous. The truck broke down twice, costing me $1,500 I didn't have. A supplier sent rancid coconut oil, ruining a batch of 50 tarts right before a festival. I maxed out my credit card to cover rent, and there were nights I ate instant noodles because every cent went into the business. Doubts crept in, especially when I scrolled through Lauren's Instagram: her Seattle condo, her designer wedding dress, her perfect life. But every time I wavered, I'd think of Clara, her hands dusted with flour, saying, "Feed the soul, Emily." So I kept going, fueled by customers' smiles and the growing buzz around Harper's Vegan Sweets. One afternoon, as I was icing cupcakes in the truck, Priya Shah, the cafe owner I'd met in college, stopped by my market stall. She tasted a lavender shortbread and grinned. "This is next level, Emily. You could supply every cafe in Portland." Over coffee at her Green Haven Cafe, she sketched a plan on a napkin: scale production, pitch to local businesses, apply for a small business grant. She introduced me to a Portland incubator program where I pitched my dessert line to a panel of investors. My voice shook as I described my vision: sustainable, vegan desserts that brought joy. But when they awarded me a $50,000 grant to lease a commercial kitchen, I felt unstoppable. I upgraded from my cramped rental space to a proper kitchen in North Portland, with enough ovens to bake 200 tarts a day. It was a leap, but I was ready. I hired my first employee, Javier, a shy culinary student who'd been laid off from a restaurant. He had a natural talent for decorating, and together we churned out desserts for markets, cafes, and pop-up events. A food critic from Willamette Week stopped by my truck, raving about my mango tarts in a review that called Harper's Vegan Sweets, "Portland's Rising Star." The review brought a flood of orders, and soon I was supplying 3 local coffee shops. I moved from my dingy studio to a slightly less dingy one-bedroom, my first real upgrade in years. But even as my business grew, I kept my distance from my family. Cousins texted updates about Lauren's wedding or my parents' latest gala. But I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. Standing in my new kitchen, surrounded by the scent of vanilla and the steady clatter of mixing bowls, I felt like I was building something real. My parents' words still stung, but they were fading now, drowned out by the hum of my ovens and the laughter of customers. I didn't know it then. But the next chapter, my sister's unexpected visit, would force me to confront the family I'd left behind. The hum of ovens and the scent of vanilla filled my new commercial kitchen in North Portland, a far cry from the cramped rental space where it all began. Harper's Vegan Sweets was no longer just a food truck dream. It was real. A steady stream of orders flowed in from local coffee shops, and a glowing review in Willamette Week called my mango tarts Portland's Rising Star. At 26, I'd poured every ounce of myself into building this business, fueled by the memory of Grandma Clara's belief in me and the sting of my parents' dismissal. I hadn't spoken to them since that night at Lauren's engagement party, when their words, "wasting my life on cupcakes," pushed me to walk away. My life was fuller now, but lonelier too. Holidays were spent baking instead of gathering with family. And then, one sunny afternoon, my sister Lauren walked into my shop, her wide-eyed stare forcing me to face the past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. The $50,000 grant from the Portland Small Business Incubator had been a game-changer. With it, I'd leased a real kitchen, 4 industrial ovens, a walk-in cooler, stainless steel counters that gleamed under fluorescent light. For the first time, I could scale Harper's Vegan Sweets beyond what Clara's Kitchen, my rickety old food truck, could handle. I hired 2 more employees to join Javier: Mia, a single mom with a gift for flavor pairings, and Sam, a barista-turned-baker whose energy made our early mornings bearable. Together, we churned out hundreds of desserts a day: lavender shortbreads, salted caramel brownies, mango coconut tarts, all bound for markets, cafes, and catering gigs. My days began at 4 a.m., mixing dough while the city slept, and ended with me collapsing on my couch, flowers still clinging to my hair. It was grueling, but every sold-out tray felt like proof that I'd chosen the right path. The real turning point came when Greenleaf Market, a regional grocery chain known for its organic deli, agreed to stock my desserts. It wasn't an easy win. I'd spent weeks perfecting a pitch, my dining table buried in spreadsheets and sample tarts, practicing until I could recite it in my sleep. The meeting, held in a sleek conference room overlooking the Willamette River, was nerve-wracking. The buyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, sampled my brownies, paused, then said, "These are exceptional. Sustainable, vegan, local ingredients. This fits our brand. Let's start with 3 stores." By the end of the month, my desserts filled Greenleaf's deli cases across Portland. Customers posted photos tagged #Harper's Vegan Sweets. Sales tripled. I could barely keep up, baking through weekends just to meet demand. Portland's food scene embraced me in ways I'd never expected. A critic from Portland Monthly visited my truck at the Saturday market, raving about my lavender shortbread in an article titled "The Vegan Dessert Revolution." That piece caught the eye of a local TV station, and soon I was invited for a morning show segment. Under bright studio lights, I nervously demoed my mango tart recipe while the host gushed about its buttery yet dairy-free crust. The segment aired on a rainy Tuesday, and by noon, my Instagram was flooded with orders. I upgraded Clara's Kitchen with a new oven and hired a graphic designer to create a logo, a stylized vanilla bean with Clara's name in cursive. It felt like a love letter to her legacy. With the business growing, I moved out of my tiny studio into a 1-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, a trendy neighborhood filled with art galleries and coffee shops. For the first time, I had a real kitchen, not just a hot plate, and a window overlooking a quiet courtyard where I could sip coffee and dream up new recipes. But success didn't erase the loneliness. Thanksgiving came, and while friends posted photos of family dinners, I baked pumpkin scones for a market event, eating leftovers alone with a glass of wine. Christmas was quieter still, just me, a string of fairy lights, and Lauren's Instagram on my phone, wedding photos, the Seattle condo, floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd blocked my parents, but her posts still slipped through, a reminder of the life they valued. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But the ache, it lingered, buried beneath layers of sugar and grit. Priya Shah, my mentor from Greenhaven Cafe, became my anchor. She stopped by the kitchen every week, bringing chai and wisdom in equal measure. "You're not just selling desserts," she said one evening, watching me pipe frosting. "You're building a movement, sustainable, joyful food." She pushed me to think bigger, to pitch to regional coffee chains, to apply for another grant. Her own story, defying her family to open her cafe, mirrored mine. Her belief in me felt like Clara's voice echoing through time. And whenever I doubted myself, Priya would glance at my sold-out trays and say, "This is proof you're enough." The next leap came when I opened my first storefront in the Pearl District, A cozy space with exposed brick walls and a glass display case that gleamed beneath warm pendant lights. I'd saved every penny from Greenleaf sales to afford the lease, and Javier, Mia, and Sam helped me paint the walls a soft sage green. Opening day was chaos. Lines out the door, a cash register that jammed twice. But we sold out by 3 p.m. Customers raved about the vibe, warm, welcoming, filled with the scent of baking bread drifting from the back. A local blogger called it Portland's new dessert haven. And I framed the review next to Clara's recipe book, resting proudly on a shelf behind the counter. I was 27, and Harper's Vegan Sweets was no longer a hobby. It was a brand. A few months later, I expanded to a second location in Beaverton. After the coffee chain Brew & Bean signed a contract to stock my desserts in their 12 Oregon stores. The deal meant hiring 3 more bakers and leasing a second delivery van, which I painted to match Clara's kitchen. The workload was relentless. 70-hour weeks, endless supplier emails, nights spent balancing books. But I loved it. My team had become my chosen family. Mia shared stories of her daughter's school plays. Javier taught me Spanish baking terms. And Sam blasted playlists that kept us dancing through late shifts. When a batch of tarts burned because of a faulty oven timer, we just laughed, salvaged what we could, and started over. This was the life I'd built. Imperfect, exhausting, but entirely mine. Then, one crisp September afternoon, as I was decorating a tray of cupcakes in the Pearl District shop, a familiar silver Audi pulled up outside. Lauren stepped out, her tailored coat almost out of place among Portland's casual crowd. She stood there for a moment, staring at the Harper's Vegan Sweets sign, her mouth slightly open, then walked in. The shop was buzzing, customers chatting over coffee, kids pressing their noses against the display case. But everything seemed to slow as she approached. "Emily," she said, her voice hesitant. "This is yours?" I nodded, wiping flour from my hands, my guard instinctively up. "All of it." She looked around, at the packed tables, the chalkboard menu, the framed reviews, and whispered, "I had no idea. It's incredible." I led her to a corner table, poured 2 coffees, and slid a mango tart her way. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since I'd walked out of her engagement party. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. "I saw your sign from the road," she explained, stirring her coffee. "David and I were visiting friends in Portland, and I had to stop." She hesitated, then met my eyes. "I've been following your Instagram, the reviews, the TV segment. You're killing it." I shrugged, unsure how to respond. "Why now, Lauren?" She fidgeted, her usual confidence gone. "I should have reached out after that night. What Dad said was awful. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I leaned back, the memory of that night crashing over me. "You didn't stop him," I said quietly, my voice sharper than I intended. "You never did." She nodded, guilt shadowing her face. "I know. I was caught up in my own world. Law, David, the wedding. I didn't see you." Her honesty disarmed me. She wasn't cruel, just blind, shaped by the same expectations I'd spent years breaking free from. "I told Mom and Dad about this place," she added. "They need to see what you've built." I tensed, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "I'm not ready for them, Lauren. Not after everything." She reached out, then stopped, sensing the walls between us. "I get it," she said softly. "But I want to be here, Em. I want to know this part of you." We sat in silence, the tart untouched between us. For the first time, I saw a crack in the distance separating us. Not enough to erase the past, but maybe enough to start again. As she left, promising to come back, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Lauren's visit had opened a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through, but it also made me realize how far I'd come. My shop, my team, my customers. They were my world now, and no one could ever call it a hobby again. Lauren's visit to my Pearl District shop left me rattled, stirring up feelings I'd buried since walking out of her engagement party 2 years earlier. Harper's Vegan Sweets was thriving. 2 storefronts, a contract with Brew and Bean, and a team that felt like family. Yet the ache of my parents' dismissal still lingered. I'd built this life without them, proved that my baking was more than a hobby. But the thought of facing them again made my stomach twist. At 27, I was proud of my little empire. But Lauren's words, "I told Mom and Dad they need to see this," hung over me like a storm cloud. And then, one quiet October morning, their black Lexus pulled into my shop's parking lot, forcing me to confront the past I'd tried so hard to outrun. The Pearl District shop was my sanctuary. Sage green walls, exposed brick, the hum of a busy morning. Customers chatted over coffee. The display case gleamed with rows of mango tarts and salted caramel brownies, and my team, Javier, Mia, and Sam, moved like a well-oiled machine in the back. I was piping lavender frosting onto cupcakes when I glanced out the window and saw the Lexus. My heart sank. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that night in Lake Oswego, when they'd called my dreams a waste. I thought about slipping out the back, but something stopped me. Maybe Clara's voice, whispering, "Face your fears." I wiped my hands on my apron and waited. My mother, Susan, stepped in first, her tailored blazer out of place among Portland's easygoing crowd. My father, Robert, followed, his eyes scanning the shop like he was appraising a property. The air grew heavy as they approached the counter. "Emily," my mother said softly, her voice gentler than I remembered, "Lauren told us about your business. We wanted to see it." I crossed my arms, defenses rising. 2 years, no contact. And now you show up? My father cleared his throat, his usual confidence dimmed. "We heard you've done well. We thought we should come." I could have sent them away, but instead I gestured to the shop. "Fine, look around." I led them through the space, pointing out the chalkboard menu I'd hand-drawn, the framed Portland Monthly Review, and Clara's recipe book resting on its shelf. A quiet tribute. In the kitchen, Javier was rolling dough and Mia was packing catering orders. I explained our process, sourcing organic berries from Sauvie Island, using local hazelnuts, scaling recipes for 12 coffee shops. My mother touched the display case, her fingers lingering on the glass. "It's beautiful," she said, almost surprised. My father asked about profit margins and staffing costs, his tone more curious than critical. "You've got 6 employees?" he asked, brow raised. "And a second location?" I nodded, bracing for the backhanded comment that never came. We sat at a corner table with coffee and a plate of my signature brownies. The silence was thick, broken only by the clink of spoons. Finally, I spoke. "Why are you here? Lauren sent you? But what do you really want?" My mother's eyes dropped to her cup. "We've missed you, Emily. Seeing this place, we realize what we've missed." My father shifted, uneasy. "We may have underestimated what you were doing." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "Underestimated? You called my life a waste, said I was playing in a kitchen." My mother winced, her hands tightening around her mug. "We were wrong to dismiss your passion," she said quietly. "We were just worried you wouldn't be secure." "Secure?" I leaned forward, voice low. "I'm secure. Not your kind of secure. Not condos and 6-figure salaries. But mine. This shop, these customers, this team, that's my stability." My father nodded slowly, eyes on the brownie he hadn't touched. "That night at Lauren's party," he said, "we didn't mean for you to hear that. But we were wrong. You've built something substantial." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd ever heard from him. My mother added, "We applied our own metrics, money, status, to your choices. That wasn't fair." I sat back, the weight of their words settling in. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, to keep the wall I'd built, but another part, Clara's part, wanted to let them in, just a little. "I missed you too," I admitted, my voice catching. "But I couldn't keep begging for you to see me." My mother's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time, I saw her not as the polished PR executive, but as someone who'd simply gotten it wrong. My father reached into his jacket and slid an envelope across the table. "We want to make this right," he said. $250,000 to level things with Lauren. 2 years ago, that money would have changed everything. Paid off debt, fixed Clara's kitchen, funded my dreams. But now, with 2 shops and a growing brand, I didn't need it. I pushed the envelope back. "My business is solid," I said, "but I have an idea." I told them about the Clara Harper Culinary Fund, a scholarship for young women pursuing food careers against family pressure. "Clara believed in me when you didn't," I said softly. "This would honor her." My father's face softened, a rare flicker of emotion. "My mother would have loved that," he said, his voice thick. "Let's do it." Over the next few months, we worked together to bring the fund to life. It wasn't easy. Meetings were tense, old wounds reopening whenever my father questioned costs, or my mother suggested branding tweaks that felt too corporate. But somehow, we found a rhythm. They attended the fund's launch at my Pearl District shop, a small event with local chefs and scholarship applicants. My mother brought a scrapbook she'd made, filled with photos from my childhood baking contests, ribbons I thought they'd long forgotten. "We kept them," she said quietly, handing it to me. "We just didn't know how to show it." I flipped through the pages, my throat tight, spotting Clara's smile in a faded Polaroid from one of our pie baking days. Lauren started coming by, too, helping with marketing ideas, bringing David to taste new recipes. One Sunday, we baked together, something we hadn't done since we were kids, sneaking cookie dough in our parents' kitchen. She laughed as she fumbled with a piping bag, and for a brief moment, I saw the sister I'd once been close to. Our relationship wasn't perfect. The years of distance had left scars. But we were trying. My parents visited again, bringing relatives who raved about my tarts. My father even asked for a recipe, a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge. By 28, Harper's Vegan Sweets was in 3 states, with plans for a 4th shop in Seattle. I was writing a dessert cookbook, weaving in Clara's recipes and my own, a love letter to the woman who'd always seen my potential. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the clatter of mixing bowls and the scent of lavender, I realized something profound. Success wasn't about their approval. It was about living true to myself. My family and I were still learning, still healing, but we'd found a fragile new beginning, one built not on expectations, but on respect. Have you ever had to fight for your passion against the people you love? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs to know they're enough. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.